Hey everybody, Pinstripe here. What is going on? Welcome back to the Hogshead podcast. Today on episode 5, talking about the Open Hogs to War project. Now, this is something I discussed a couple of weeks ago in a video, but I did miss out a few things, so we're going to be going over that as well as some additional stuff from within the Hogs to War community that has been discussed as of recently, both in the Discord and just in general. I do need to, scour the internet for some Hogs and War news. I don't know if I'll do that as a separate thing. I'm obviously trying to keep that up to date in terms of the Hogs of War Reheated project, which, as you know, is the remastering of the current Hogs of War. But Open Hogs of War intends to essentially be an editor that allows you to customize everything within the game, and it also intends to remake the entire game. Now, I don't know if that includes doing something similar to a remaster, or if it means keeping everything the same, but just updating textures and things and making them not so small, because textures in particular are tiny, because it is essentially pixel art, and the game has them as like very small file sizes, including dimensions as well. We're talking like 50 by 50 in terms of width and height, so editing those, as I've discussed before, is a tricky task in programs like Photoshop, because you're dealing with very small pixels. You can't get that much detail, so having something like that is going to be able to allow us to edit textures more and add more detail to models, characters, pigs, everything, you know. So as well as being an editor, like I said, going to be remaking the entire game. That, I believe, includes the PC version, fixing the AI not being able to move, which is also a huge thing, but that is also a thing, I believe, like a task or a goal that is set for the future. Hogsy is the main man for that, and the link to the Hogs of War, the Open Hogs of War, Discord will be in the description below, and the link to the video I made about it will be in the, I guess, at the end of this podcast. I think I put outros in this podcast. I don't remember. But the editor itself is going to impact the community a lot, because, well, if we have full reign over the customization of the game, then we're going to be able to do anything. That includes making new levels, new teams. It's going to be open source, I believe, and it's going to be supported on Windows and Linux. So we're going to have multiple ways of accessing this, as well as the future plans to expand to other platforms such as Android, which opens up other doors as well. So I'm thinking of it from the perspective of making levels. Just imagine being able to make a new level from scratch, or being able to edit existing levels and make them more challenging. I know people have been doing that as well on the PC version, making hard modes, but again, that is just restricted by the fact that AI can't move. So it's cool to add more pigs in there and do stuff like that. I believe Dr. Sticky has been making a lot of mods and things, which is awesome to see. Keep that going, my dude. It's very, very helpful to us, especially with the other mods of the single player, like the single pig mode, the alone mode, I guess it's called. And just making the game more challenging, because we're at a stage now where there are a lot of us who know basically everything there is to know about, speedrunning and knowing what to do when in terms of different levels. And they basically know things 100%, so they're able to face up against the AI in both normal and hard mode and take it on like it's nothing. So they're looking for more of a challenge, and that is what this Open Hogs of War project will allow us to do. So alongside being able to make things, it puts us at a crossroads where we have the Open Hogs of War project, which gives us the editor, and Hogs of War Reheated. So we have two major projects that are splintering off. Obviously, they're not linked because the people behind them don't know each other. They're completely separate. But either way, it gives us a good basis to go from, because Hogs of War is... I keep saying this, Hogs of War isn't that relevant today, but it will allow Hogs of War to come back into the fold, especially on PS4, which is what they're looking at releasing the remake on, is what they're looking at releasing Reheated on. So that will, bring it to the forefront a bit more, get people's eye on it, and bring them back into that fold and being like, well, we remember that you like Hogs of War the original, and it's nostalgic and stuff, so here's a remake, and will allow you to relive past nostalgia. The project itself is still labelled as early development, as is the Reheated project. So the projects themselves are in their infancy. There's still a lot of details being hashed out. So the editor itself, I believe you can download it and you can tinker with it, but it's not necessarily in a state where everyone will understand it because that's still being worked on. So you can launch it, you can do things, you can tinker. But you're not in a place yet where you can necessarily create new levels and things. It's not at that point yet where you can go crazy. It will get there eventually, and obviously I believe the team are still looking for, or they're always looking for people to come along and help. If you have programming experience, if you have coding experience, if you understand their language essentially, then I'm pretty sure it will be very much appreciated if you want to lend a hand. As I said, the link to the Discord itself is in the description. And of course, if you have any further queries or questions, then head over to that Discord and feel free to ask them, because I can only give so much info. My topic is more just discussing the impact of this editor on the community, on us as individuals, and just in general, because Hogs of War is just built so complicatedly. It's just incredibly complex. I know that wasn't a word, by the way. It's incredibly complex in the way that it's put together, that it just makes modding increasingly difficult. If you don't understand programming, if you don't understand DOSBox, if you don't understand unmangling and mangling and the different file types, it's incredibly complicated to do the simplest thing, like editing textures. Again, I know I talk about this in every podcast and essentially in every video, but it's true. It's just ridiculously complicated. All I want to do is change the color of one team from purple to black, or green to orange, or just to mess around with it. And that's why I'm really looking forward to the Open Hogs of War editor, because it will make it easy to understand from the perspective of someone who doesn't know coding, they don't know programming or anything like that, and it's laid out in a way that is easy to understand and process. It's an editor. You'll have you'll have tabs, and you'll have just all sorts. And I'm not just talking about the levels as well. It will also include being able to add things. So you'll have, say the characters, they've got their each individual look. So you've got the hero who's got the cap on and the fancy uniform, which essentially isn't any different to any other character, because the models themselves are extremely basic. So it's the textures that add that extra detail. So what you could do is then take the 3D model of the pig and edit it yourself, So you can add extra bits on it, or you can change his hat or something, So it will give you the freedom to take 3D models and add to them, or even add your own custom models. I believe that is another goal for this project as well, is to add further customization ability, I suppose. How far that can go, I'm not sure, because if you take something, or if you want to make something like a new weapon or a new model, I don't know how complex that will be. Incredibly, probably, because you're adding something to an existing game, and that requires you to edit memory and make more space for things. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't really know the logistics or the technicality of everything, but it is exciting. And as soon as we have a functioning, exciting editor, in that I can take it and I can show everybody editing levels and things, because there is a level of editing in there at the moment. You can, I believe, change the color of things, and there's just bits and pieces that are being worked on left, right and center. So again, I can't speak directly for the project. I'm only going off of what I've seen so far, but overall it is very compelling stuff. So with that, I need my lemonade, because it's difficult to sit and talk for so long. I'm not used to doing this usually. You guys know that I like to edit everything, or at least the majority of the videos that I have. So my commentaries are fairly clean and spliced together. So when I make these podcasts, I need to get used to having just dead air. I don't always need to be talking. I can take a breath, take a breather, take a moment, and just chill, because I'm doing this on the fly, which is also something that I have done before in previous commentaries and videos and podcasts as well. But slowly I've gotten used to putting all of my thoughts on paper, having some form of a script, and going off of that. So I can do things on the fly, I can think for myself and speak and blah blah blah, but it does take some getting used to, because I don't like seeing a lot of like big empty space in Audacity. I'm sitting here with my mic with Audacity open, and I'm just trying to keep the conversation going, because talking to yourself for 20 minutes can be difficult, and there will be a lot of pauses, but I don't know, it's just something I'm also working on as well. In terms of other news in the Hogs of War universe or community, we have made good strides in expanding our knowledge of hex values and basically tinkering with individual levels to add in or change weapons of characters, alongside being able to access the Ace and Legend classes, which I will be bringing out a tutorial on, which I know I said in the last video, but it is coming, I promise. I just wanted to make a new podcast and sit down and chill and talk for a little bit, because it's been, I want to say, about a month since the last one, which I think is going to be the basis going forward. It'll be like once a month or so. It just depends on the level of engagement and news. The words that I was looking for. Engagement in terms of people being interested in this podcast. It has been fairly well received so far, which is awesome to see. And also news, because I need things to be happening in the Hogs of War universe and community for, stuff to talk about. But I can obviously, take things from the game and break those down a bit more, which I do intend to in future. I will be going into in-depth talks about individual levels and specific weapons and things, and they will usually coincide with videos that have been done about them. So if I bring out a video on poison gas, then I will then eventually make a podcast talking about poison gas, which is interesting because it's a challenge to talk about something of such low, not value, but just low, it's such a low talking point. If you take an individual weapon, you kind of need to expand on that and branch into areas that are related, but also you don't want to drift too far away from just rambling, which is what I've been doing for the past 4 minutes. But I just wanted to get that out there because this podcast is going well, and I want it to stay that way. And obviously, your level of support is always greatly appreciated, including comments as well. I have seen one or two that have been criticizing the length of these podcasts. And that it's not technically a podcast if it's not a certain length, or it's not technically a podcast if you're just sat talking to yourself. But you can label anything. If you've got a specific thing in mind, I mean, mine isn't. This podcast itself isn't perfect, and maybe technically, by its definition, it may not be a podcast. But I'm calling it that because it's just a point where I can be a bit more free in the way that I speak to you guys, because with videos it's all very robotic. You hear what I want you to hear, whereas these are a bit more personal, I suppose, because you're able to hear me speak in a way that I normally wouldn't in a video. And what I mean by that is that things are a bit more broken up, so I'm having to, obviously, like I said, think on the fly and keep the engagement going. I feel like this is going to be about like 7 or 8 minutes of me talking about podcasts, and like 5 minutes of talking about Hogs of War. But yeah, the huge thing, going back to my original point, the huge thing is accessing the Ace and the Legend, because being able to play as those guys is awesome, but it is a shame, spoiler alert, it is a shame that you can only play as the Legend on the final mission. On the PS1 version. You can, of course, on the PC version, which I think I will show in the tutorial video itself as well, because I know that people aren't necessarily going to watch the Who is a Legend video and then find the tutorial in there. So I will chuck both PS1 and PC tutorials together in a single video so everyone can access the Ace and the Legend on both platforms. The other main issue is Windows 10. It's thrown around so much, like how do I access it on Windows 10? Blah 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 blah. That's probably the number one question or query we get in the Discord and just in the community in general. If you look on Steam or other social media, that's up there as being one of the major things. And I believe that's another thing that is looking at being fixed with the Open Hogs of War project. Rolling back to that, that's another thing that they want to fix is ensuring that it works, ensuring that the remake of Hogs of War works on all platforms. So like I said, it will be Windows and Linux supported, which obviously includes Windows 10. I'm not sure about Windows 8 because Windows 8 sucks. I'm still on Windows 7, by the way. Can you imagine that? But I love to live in the dark ages. It's great. Also, going back to my original point, the Legends cannot be played on any other level besides Mission 25. I mean, I'm guessing that was the expectation because, you know, the design decision was made that the player shall not access the Legends. You can if you hack it or if you cheat it in some way, if you edit some save files or whatnot, use the hex values, which is what we've been doing. And if you do manage to get them up and running on any other level that isn't Mission 25, they will appear as a grunt. But if you take your turn with that pig or that legend or whatever, you may be able to take your turn, but the next turn by the enemy will result in the game crashing, or it will just crash outright because the game doesn't know what to do with those pigs in the level because they were never meant to be there, essentially. But when you think about it, it doesn't really matter too much. Because if you have an entire team of heroes and you get to Mission 25, then you visually look the same as the legends around you. You have the trench coat, you have the hat. The only difference is on the PC version because you appear as, you know, the same character model. You appear as the hero model. You don't appear as the legend model. The legend model is how they look on the final level. They have the hats, they have the trench coats. They look visually more appealing. So the only thing you're missing out on is the weapons, technically, because you're technically a legend on the final mission, really. You just don't have the shockwave, you don't have the fire airstrike. You're not missing out that much because every other weapon is yours except for the tranquilizer, and you have the addition of the sniper rifle as a hero. So yeah, I don't know, it's a 50-50 one. It's one of those things that, like, visually it would be nice to see on every other level, but overall, you know, it's not going to be missed too much. You can play as the ace on every other level, which is great. So you can go ahead and be those guys who, as I've said before, are missing the sniper rifle, but you do have the tranquilizer. You just don't have the shockwave, but you do have the fire airstrike. So things are swapped around a little bit, and we have talked about the ace before in several other videos. But overall, I don't really see it as being too much of a loss. But it is cool to access them anyway and be able to play as them. Having that extra health and things is awesome. And in future I do intend to showcase further missions where it's like one class versus another, you know? Like recently I did the Ace versus Commando on the PS1. So I'll be doing Ace versus Hero, Legend versus Legend, all sorts of things. So plenty of things coming up. That's probably the biggest piece of news in terms of the community and what we've been up to, but I know other people have been doing some other bits and pieces. My intention as of recently is to make some more artwork. I've had some arty ideas in my head, so I will be releasing those at some point. It just requires me to, you know, sit down and do it. These days time just moves so quickly. I feel like I have very little time to do anything other than get home from work, make a video, upload that, and see how it does, you know? I don't really have any other creative outlets at the moment. Animation is, of course, you know, one of the main parts of my job, and that's awesome, but it only currently extends to what I'm doing in work, and that's about it. I don't have the impetus or just the energy to go ahead and make other things, because you guys know that I made Source Filmmaker stuff. And it would be awesome to make Hogs of War animations. I do have a pig model, a custom one that was made for me by a friend that I was rigging and planning to animate, but that just kind of fizzled out because, again, I just lost motivation for it. I will eventually pick it back up again, and animations will be showcased on the channel, but overall it is currently a work in progress, along with everything else too, both in terms of videos and just ideas for videos and series that I'm doing, and, you know, casual commentaries and dual commentaries. And I also have an idea to make Hogs of War competitive, so that would require us to use Parsec alongside the emulator version of Hogs of War, PS1 of course, to allow us to play online multiplayer, which is awesome. And I know I've discussed it before, because I want to do some shoutcasting as well, and just bring the competitive side of the game into the fold. Originally, the intention was that Hogs of War was going to be played. If it was going to be played by multiple people, then they would be in the same room with additional controllers. It was never the intention to have online multiplayer. I believe it was vaguely worked on the PC version, but it was just ported so badly that it's impossible to successfully play online multiplayer with the PC version, which is a shame because the PC version looks very clean, very neat. Which is also something I want to discuss in future as well, the differences between PC and PS1, but that's a topic for another time. But I have mentioned before about doing shoutcasting, so that would require me to basically spectate two other people's games and talk about what is going on at the time. I'm basically just trying to make a competitive scene for the game, which I know sounds crazy for a game that's 20 years old about anthropomorphic pigs that fight each other, but I feel like there's enough in there to talk about, and there's counters, there's weapons that have different counters. You can just go into so much detail about different things and what players are thinking at what specific time during a match. So yeah, I feel like there's enough there for me to go ahead and talk about it, but it just requires me to go ahead and do it. So that requires me to jump in with two other people, record their match, and then talk about what's going on screen. I will indeed mention or speak to people before the game, so I'm gonna make it a full professional thing, as if it were an esport kind of vibe. So interview the players before the game, and then have the mood set as being super competitive, that kind of vibe, and then talk to them post-match as well about their strategy and all sorts of things. Just trying to make something of a mountain of a molehill, but in a positive way, if that makes any sense. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I'd like to know what people think, just because I know it's not a silly idea, but just something that's a little bit different. But I have had some positive reinforcement made by people, which has been lovely to see. But overall, that is pretty much going to wrap up this podcast episode for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed just me rambling for the past 20 odd minutes, which has been lovely. Which also takes the toll on my voice. Unfortunately, this podcast isn't half an hour long, which is what I intended it to be, because apparently that's the default time limit for a podcast, or for it to be labeled as a podcast. Then I'm not mad. It's fine. I'll label it as a podcast if I want to. But let me know your thoughts on everything we've talked about in the comments. And overall, I will catch you guys later for the next one.